So tonight, as I said, we have two special readers, Christopher Levenson and Leanne Boschman. Christopher is going to go first. He is the first winner of the Eric Gregory Award, and he's also the co-founder and first editor of Arc magazine and has published 13 books of poetry. Wow. In 2014, Night Vision was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award. And after teaching English and poetry workshop courses at Carleton University for 31 years, he moved to Vancouver in 2007. And that's where you live now? Okay, come on out and welcome to Victoria.
Sure, I don't run out of time. Okay, this new book, or relatively new book, came out, I think, February last year, and it's entirely short poems between 2 and 10 lines each. And it's a bit of a mixture, and I tried to put them into categories and then decided that for purposes of reading, it really didn't matter. So I'll start off with Hummingbird. Deftest of epicures, this mini tornado sips with extended beak from a snifter of hibiscus, samples, moves on. And then secondly, Lion. Heraldry got it all wrong. They are not rampant and noble. Most of the time, they are just layabouts, sunning on rocks, complacent and chauvinist. But it shows what a good coiffure and a deep voice can do for your self-esteem. That, plus a bit of land to spray and call your own and defend for as long as you can, till someone with a louder voice, younger body, stronger teeth drives you away into the veldt alone. Grooming. This could, of course, apply to lions too, but it's not meant here. Nadine, for a moment only, at bedtime, combing her daughter's long hair, teasing the skeins out, can feel the other's gaze taken up in herself and answered as she stands there, that younger self, wide eyes still so full of hope, nothing too tangled yet. Call waiting. I don't even have to read this one. It's so short I can remember it. From the further shore, I hear it through the mist. And I want to say to the loon, your call is important to us. And Heron. These are not all about animals, but you tend to start off with these. Heron. Upright, he looks collapsible. Some kind of trick photographic contraption as he picks his way, stilted, fastidious, down the early morning shoreline. But let him fly. Let him take off over water with that huge, steady wing beat, and his unmistakable blue-gray shape is supreme. Beak and head held back, legs trailing, he looks askance at the chit-chat and squabbles of lesser birds, intent on his own measured purposes. Office. And somebody was reading something about darkness. I forget her name. This is also perhaps about darkness. Office. The sunset only stays while the light is off and the typewriter's silent. The woods are stained with russet, the river is bleeding, but when the lights are on, you can only see the darkness. Newsreel. In the news clip from Liberia, the naked running boy, when shot, did not get up, but lay in the dust quite still. This was no stunt. In the film of his life, he was not simply an extra. He played the title role. Manuscript. I'm thinking here of this medieval illuminated manuscript. 7 decades illuminate her parchment face with unfinished history. Currency. This is 9. Got this all sorted out, but there we are. As the high tide recedes, she wanders the early beach, scours for sand dollars. No luck. Seagulls have beaten her to it. Intent on their livelihood, they smash them with expert bills, discarding the shells of breakfast, the wreckage of mussel and crab. Empty-handed, disconsolate, Una the scavenger is left with small change. Ecology, this is another one. I can't remember my poems, but one of the advantages of short poems is that you sometimes can. And this came from, I saw something about Texan oil, and it was called Sweet, Light, Crude, and this made me think of other things. Ecology. Unlike oil, natural gas, or the Amazon forest, love is a renewable resource. Drill deep enough and you'll find it still welling up from the bed of the ocean or flaring across prairie landscapes. Sweet, light, crude, whatever. I think I'll read just 1 or 2 more from this, and then, well, another one that I can remember. Old age is contagious. Stick around long enough and you'll be infected too. Now I'm going to read 2 poems from a book that I've recently had accepted by Carleton Press, and we're coming out later this year. The first one is appropriate for today, which is Holocaust Memorial Remembrance Day. Mr. Schlesinger. We called him Mr. Schlesinger. Subsequently, I learned German and I realized it should be Schlesinger. However, that's what we called him. A Jewish refugee, he probably came just before the war to our North London suburb and stayed a while in our house till the authorities took him away to an internment camp, maybe the Isle of Man, as an enemy alien alongside captured Nazis. We never heard of him again. All that remained were his books, stowed in a cupboard in my brother's bedroom for the duration. a Murat Sanders dictionary, 3 heavy tomes of Bismarck's Gedanken und Erinnerungen, Struwwelpeter, and other evidence of scholarship. Now, with both my parents dead, he is untraceable. No one is left to ask. Had he stayed at home in Germany, there would have been meticulous documents, closure. And finally, erosion. Experts had warned, of course, decades ago that the soil here was unstable, would sometime give way, but no one was listening back then. They were busy assembling shoreline properties, servicing holiday lots and access roads. Sure, crackpot ecologists were evangelizing doom, but in the resort's lackadaisical sun-struck sprawl, no one deciphered the shifting alliances of sand and grass on the dunes, or noticed high tides eating away at the cliff's edge. War surplus gun emplacements had held back invasion once. No worries, they'd do it again. It was all over in a matter of minutes. The slapdash holiday shacks collapsed in dust. Bandstand and boarded up amusement arcade, ice cream van, Dodgem cars, real estate offices, are at one now with the ocean.
Thank you, Christopher. And thank you for reminding us of Holocaust Remembrance Day today. Next up is Leanne Boschman, who's very familiar to most of us here. Leanne is a Vancouver because she was the artistic director. Thank you, artistic director of this PEP. So Leanne is a Vancouver Island-based writer whose poetry and prose explores gendered labor, intergenerational family dynamics, ecological crises, and spiritual resilience. I think you covered it all. Her work has been published in journals and anthologies. Her second collection of poems, Here at the Crux, was released in August 2022. So let's give it up for Leanne. Just to remind you, she has books. Do you have books, Christopher? Yes, I do. Okay, so they both have books that you can purchase, and they'll sign them after the reading.
Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. And thanks, Zoe. And thanks, Planet Earth Poetry. All the open mic readers. I just feel so fortunate every time I drive down the Malahat on a Friday night to be here for this event and to take in all of your words. They mean a lot, and they bring me much delight, entertainment, comfort, make me uncomfortable too, which is good. So yeah, thank you all. I thought about beginning this reading with a few words from a Jewish American poet, one who meant a lot to me and really inspired me to want to write poetry, Adrienne Rich. And I've just been doing this. I think she shone a light ahead on the path for many poets. I know she did for me. So this is from Atlas of the Difficult World. Okay, just a short excerpt. I know you are reading this poem by the light of the television screen where soundless images jerk and slide while you wait for the newscast from the Intifada. I know you are reading this poem in a waiting room of eyes met and unmeeting, of identity with strangers. I know you are reading this poem by fluorescent light in the boredom and fatigue of the young who are counted out, who count themselves out. At too early an age, I know you are reading this poem through your failing sight, the thick lens enlarging these letters beyond all meaning, yet you read on because even the alphabet is precious. And that just seems apropos in this place too, somehow. So this is the first poem from here at the Crux, starting at the very beginning. Tuesday's child, and that's a reference to that old traditional rhyme. I'm a Tuesday's child, apparently full of grace, and that always seemed kind of ironic to me. So you'll see why. Tuesday's child. The nurse's hands, were they warm or cold clamps of a vice grip exacting pressure as she placed me on the white metal scale? They were not my mother's hands. My mother, still shackled after the thrashing, the amnesia drug, a mix of morphine and scopolamine. It's unlikely she smiled when the obstetrician, a little more Marcus Welby than Dr. Kildare, with a brisk grin, told her, "You have a little girl, Mrs. Boschman." My mother slept off the drugs for days, reminded me for the rest of her life how god-awful the whole thing was. Gleaming placenta tree in a metal waste bin, and in the small industrial crib below the gauze sky of fluorescent lit ceiling, I lay until my father arrived. Slapped on the back too after the news reached him at a track meet. "Congratulations, coach," echoing behind him as he ran to his car. He gasped at the sight of my forceps bruised, misshapen skull, so the nurse reassured him that babies' heads are malleable, will mend and be right again. But when she held me out, said, "Here is your daughter," my fleet-footed father stumbled backwards, blurted, "Are you sure?" He loved to tell this story each year on my birthday, and I still hear it. But now I listen in for the crinkle of small ice puddles breaking, the rustle of newly knitted limbs under starched sheets, and birds flying back, navigating by stars, by waves, by the magnetic field of earth, the smell of earth opening. I look for the green rosaries of cottonwood seeds and pussy willows in prairie twilight sleep of early April. I begin to hear the budding benediction of that day. And this next poem I thought I would read since Chris read all those wonderful animal poems, but I don't think this animal is anyone's favorite. But anyway. Introduction to Philosophy, Classical and Contemporary Readings. I thought the textbook could be salvaged after it resided with a rotting apple in my backpack, and even after it was drenched by autumn rainfall on the porch where I had set it to air out. But after a rat made it the main course of its evening meal, I knew for certain I would never taste those last few chapters. I took consolation from the fact we had both savored its lexicon, and it was true, some of those words for me had been like the hot burst of a radish on my tongue. The book still lies on its sodden front cover, holes chewed out of its back. Small tatters of paper lie scattered about, the less digestible parts, I suppose. And I find myself wondering if the rat most enjoyed the mind-body problem, or if it preferred the blandness of stoic resignation to fate. Okay. All right, I was born in the year of the rat, according to Chinese astrology. I've never been thrilled by that. Anyway. I wanted to read this next poem because we're coming up to an anniversary that I think that no one really wants to come up to, and it's a sad one, which is almost a year now since the war in Ukraine began, and I'm just really wanting us to hold space too and remember all of the struggles and the suffering, so a year ago I wrote this. It's Springtime Diary 2022. In late February, buds are still brown nodes on tree branches. A few weeks later, witness the opening of these solar collectors, vital oxygen factories. They are small green flags unfurled, their only anthem, breathe, breathe, breath is sacred. Recall homely flower bulbs planted in fall, their peeling brown papery tunics. Marvel that they hold within them the parrot and rainbow tulips. Now in March, they are variegated clusters commingling. In springtime, sift the soil, witness Earth's ceaseless diurnal cycle, the web of fungi, protozoa, and microanthropoids. Find evidence of earthworm labor, burrowing, composting. See the bent necks of germinating seeds, how they invoke a benediction of sunlight and rain. And just when all this growth seems unstoppable, a storm unleashes sleet, shivers crocuses with snow, like the ravages of war. Tyrant winds threaten to blight our leafy hopes. Even while many of us are ready to restore this earth hawked and poisoned by battles, wielding only plowshares and pruning hooks, we long to make scorched ground flourish. So I wanted to just show you the cover of this book. It's a detail from Collage by my partner, Edward F. And it's his birthday today. So, and when this book came out, we got to choose a detail from a watercolor, and this is from Precipitous Signs, a Rain Journal. So I wanted to read a poem from this book that I wrote about him when we lived in Prince Rupert, and it's a long way to anywhere from Prince Rupert. I don't know if you've been there, but it's like about 8 hours drive to Prince George. It's about 18 hours to drive to Vancouver. But Ed loved the open road for going on painting trips. He would throw all his painting equipment in the back of his pickup truck and just head out on the road for however long he could go. So this, and I like to see, the world through the eyes of a visual artist. So in the second stanza of this poem, I'm just imagining titles for his landscape poems and just trying to see the world, the landscape as he saw it. It's called Traveling Inland for Edward. Just past the industrial park, a kind of rapture as you shift into fifth gear, reach for the first of countless cups of coffee, drone of CBC radio, easel and paint encrusted coveralls on the floor. Skeins of mist ascend from Skeena River, sliver of blue in cleft of mountain, coven of trees draped with moss, contemplative cows in field, reclining forest, Carnaby sawmill, solemnity of brown hills after pine beetle, banks of Chilako River awash with afternoon sunlight. Innumerable tubes of yellow ochre, aquamarine, bottle green squeezed out, ditches burst with purple fireweed and red paintbrush. Any excuse for a road trip, this appetite for distances most would find wearying. But your pickup flies a dusty, insect-spattered chariot past Kitwanga, Hazelton, Stalaco. Later at a roadside rest stop, a chance to close your eyes for a few hours, but not before admiring infinite field of stars twinkling brighter before dawn. So, all right. I'm just going to read one more poem from here at the Crux, and it's a longer poem. It's actually a prose poem, and I'm trying to think of how to introduce it, but I'm thinking about Claire, the jobs for poets. And this is the way that I could introduce this poem, is that maybe if poets were writing about the housing crisis or about housing or something like that. When I lived in Vancouver, I found myself in a not a great apartment in a basement. And then I had this wonderful chance through a friend telling me about an apartment in East Van and in a part of the city I love. And she knew about it because the former resident of the apartment, who had been there for 40 years until she was in her 90s, had gotten ill and had to leave. And the woman's name was Helen. I didn't get to meet her, but I heard all these stories and I felt like I was living in her apartment for quite a while. And I'd heard how when Helen left, when she was finally leaving the apartment, she said, "I'll be back." And so I always have been haunted by that. So this is East Pender Street Diary. Mrs. Hill, the neighbor in number 3, told me Helen lived here for almost 40 years, how they watched Wheel of Fortune together, except for 2 evenings a week when Charlie from number 8 came down to play poker. Helen's days were spent at this second floor window. She didn't even go down for the summer picnic. Mrs. Hill brought her a leg of chicken and potato salad on a checkered plate. When they carried her out at 97, lungs festering with pneumonia, Helen swore she'd be back. Autumn drafts rattle these windows, their mottled aluminum frames, loose handles. Weeks after moving in, I still think of this place as Helen's apartment. A gray mound of curtains in a corner, the only thing here when I moved in. But apparently Helen didn't care who looked in, saw her in a fraying housecoat. This morning, I wonder if the faux fireplace mantle is really a leftover wish for warmth to gather around. But from what I've heard, Helen wasn't overly sociable. She was practical, could recognize a deal, 4 decades of below market rent, and someone to sit with when the pipes started to rattle and the circuits corroded. When that wheel was spun, she was a winner. It's almost December, and just before leaving on winter vacation, a tapping at my door. The landlord, with an amicable smile, drops off a bottle of maple syrup and a Christmas card. Suddenly, I see again the line of cards my mother strung up in the kitchen each year. Snowbound villages, gift-filled sleighs, nativities, cheerful benedictions from one home to another. The looping contour of each distinct signature. Send me a card, Helen, from wherever you are now, out of the country, no need for sturdy luggage. Most of your life was lived in the last century with its baggage of wars, weapons of mass destruction, headlines like "Senator lives, blonde dies." In the bedroom, your dreams still drift like strands of hair I find between floorboards. When I awaken sometimes, it seems there's just a room between us, and it isn't a flea market hall full of mid-century tableware and ornaments. The pretty girl vases with hollow heads where the flowers go. Who thought of that? While waiting for yours to arrive, I will send you a newsy card. I see children head off to school. They bounce like leaves buoyed by a spring breeze. But on the evening news, I've heard them talk about making plans just in case they must rescue one another from a shooter. A few weeks ago, a young woman barricaded in a hotel room sent out messages to the world, a desperate supplicant hoping that someone would answer, like certain trees do after a cold winter, even just a few amber drops. Pale light of early spring on a February afternoon. But I'm fairly certain, Helen, that seasons no longer concern you. No need for mothballs between sweaters entombed in cedar chests or freshening up summer linens. After a long, slow tumble, now you float in a 5th season, that umbilical vine severed that connected you to the nutty belly of earth. I don't know your birthday, but 12 months to measure time seems meager. You can be a birthday girl every day now. I like to picture you in your housecoat floating on a bamboo raft on a sea of supernovas. I remember once as a child being afraid when I couldn't see my parents, sitting stiffly on my aunt's sofa, staring out her window. I willed them to walk through the door. Not long ago on an evening, the first winter after they were both gone, just before Christmas, I went to the cemetery. A maple tree, the only landmark in the darkness, but no way to find their headstone. The ground rippled white. How close they felt in that holy hush. Now just beyond our window, Helen, I see the swollen tips of branches. They can only hold the light in for so long before they burst open.
Thank you.